Hey everyone, welcome to an NFL video. This one we're taking an early look at week 3 of the NFL season on Draftkings. We'll put a little lineup together as well. Now this is a very early initial look. There's a lot of research to be done by the time Saturday rolls around, but we're just going to take a little quick look at it, see what's popping early on in the week. And before we continue, if you could leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, please consider that subscribe button. It really helps me out, and I really appreciate it. You can also follow me on Twitter at ChrisPennell16. And if you like the spreadsheets I build every single week for every NFL slate, links in the description below for my Patreon. All my extra content is on there, write-ups and all that good stuff. Projections, rankings, cash rankings, all that stuff. So, wide receiver versus quarterback data. Anyway, let's get into this slate. So, there is going to be a really fun game this week. We have Patrick Mahomes versus Lamar Jackson, two early MVP candidates. It's going to be in Kansas City. The Ravens, though, they have the tough defense. The Chiefs have the soft defense, but it does not matter who Patrick Mahomes is playing. He is a beast. Last week versus the Raiders, he was surprisingly lower owned than I thought he would be. I ended up playing him in cash games. He was 21%. I was under the assumption he was going to be the chalk quarterback. I guess that was Josh Allen, which he did fine too, but I was surprised not many people were on Mahomes as much, and he had a fantastic second quarter. What was it, 280 yards, 4 touchdowns. He was absolutely unconscious. He had 44 pass attempts, 30 completions, just a typical Pat Mahomes day. 443 yards, 4 touchdowns, no interceptions. The guy's a beast. I will say, though, he's very expensive, and he does face the Baltimore defense, which we know has been very tough pretty much ever since they've existed, and they're tough again this year. But it is hard to contain Patrick Mahomes. I know they are without Tyreek Hill, which is a downgrade, but Mecole Hardman and Demarcus Robinson looked just fine as just fun replacements last week. Mecole Hardman had that 72-yard touchdown called back because of the LaShawn McCoy holding, which sucked. But Sammy Watkins is fine, Travis Kelce. It's going to be hard to stop this offense. Looks like LaShawn McCoy and Damian Williams are banged up, so they're going to be having to pass the ball a ton. They can definitely do it. There's no stopping Patrick Mahomes. You just have to hope he does not go ballistic on your defense. I will say he's 7,600, so it's going to be hard to afford him this week. I was trying to build early lineups, and it's very, very difficult to spend up for a quarterback this week, because last week we had all that Raiders value: Josh Jacobs, Tyrell Williams, Darren Waller. They're all about $1,000 more expensive this week, which kind of sucks because it's fun having all that value, but we can't get that lucky every single week. So it looks like I'm going to have to spend down for quarterback this week. But in GPPs, I would love to get either Patrick Mahomes or Lamar Jackson in, so I will get to Lamar Jackson right now. And just like Patrick Mahomes, he's having an amazing start to the season. Everyone was calling him a running back, which I might have been a little guilty of that, but he has looked amazing this season on the ground and through the air. The first week versus Miami, he didn't have to run, and so he didn't. They pretty much just passed the ball the entire time. He had a perfect passer rating. Then week 2 versus Arizona, he had 24 completions, 37 attempts, completed 64% of his passes for 272 yards, 2 touchdowns. But his run game came back. He had 16 carries for 120 yards, did not get into the end zone. If he got into the end zone, he would have had another amazing fantasy day. He still went off. 33 fantasy points, 6,700. His price came up to $7K, but this is a prime matchup versus the Kansas City Chiefs, who have all the offense of the world, but they do not have a very good defense. This game should be back and forth. The Vegas total is extremely high. This is going to be a very fun game. And I tried to make a lineup with Lamar Jackson at quarterback and cash. It's very hard to do, guys. It's going to cost you one of the prime running backs, and I don't think I'm willing to do that because I think we have enough value in Josh Allen, which I'll talk about later, and I think he can have a similar game to Lamar Jackson. I wouldn't say he's got as much ceiling of him as Lamar does in this game, but I still think he's going to be fine in his matchup. But yeah, Lamar Jackson versus Kansas City defense, he should be fine. He's basically a running back that can throw. He's a very good thrower now, so I'm not saying he's just a running back, but I'm just saying he runs the ball so much, it's like you're playing a running back in the quarterback position that can also throw the ball at a really high level. So I definitely like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. Tom Brady versus the Jets. It's the Patriots. They should smash, and especially if Antonio Brown's playing. He should. I know his accuser's meeting with the NFL is tomorrow, I believe. Hopefully that goes well for Antonio Brown. He's obviously got all the talent in the world, and if Antonio Brown's on the field, that only helps Tom Brady. He looked his way often. So like Tom Brady versus the Jets at home. Dak Prescott gets that matchup versus Miami, which everyone eats versus Miami. The only problem is I can see them just running Zeke into the ground in this game. It's 3 weeks now off the holdout, and I think this is going to be a big Zeke game. Zeke's really hard to afford those as well. So, but I do like Dak Prescott. He's had an amazing start to this season. Someone I was not as high on coming into the season, but he's just been balling out. He had a 36-point week 1 versus the Giants, 28 points versus Washington, a slow start versus Washington, but ended up completing 26 passes out of 30 attempts, which is an 86% completion percentage, 270 yards, 3 touchdowns, and a pick. He will be without Michael Gallup, but he's got a decent replacement in Devin Smith, who's a deep threat. Amari Cooper's obviously got, he's got near elite talent. So I think Dak Prescott's going to be fine. Miami cannot stop anybody right now. They are possibly the worst team I've ever seen in my life. Deshaun Watson versus the Chargers, not too interested. I mean, he's a great quarterback, but I don't really love picking on the Chargers, especially away from home. Russell Wilson versus the Saints is interesting. We know Russell Wilson's better at home, and the Saints' defense is susceptible through the air, a much tougher run defense. He just doesn't have a ton of weapons, but, it doesn't really matter with Russell Wilson. He just tends to get the job done every single week. Jimmy Garoppolo had a huge game last week versus Cincinnati, but not too interested versus Pittsburgh. Aaron Rodgers, just not too interested in Aaron Rodgers this week. Cam Newton, he looks awful. I know he had a ton of yards last week, but he has no accuracy whatsoever. Drew Brees is not playing. Now, Josh Allen, this is probably one of my favorite plays on the slate in the quarterback position just because of his price. At $5,900, he was really chalky last week. I believe it was 33% in cash games. And is he the best passer? No, he's not, but he doesn't have to be because he's very good on the ground. He had 10 attempts the first game, 7 attempts the second game, 21 yards, 38 yards. He did get a rushing touchdown last week and the week before, so I do like that. Josh Allen is great on the ground. I mean, he doesn't have to be that effective through the air because he can get the job done on the ground. He gives us a safe floor, kind of like Kyler Murray, Lamar Jackson. They're not on as good teams as Lamar Jackson, but I think Josh Allen's fine at $5,900 versus Cincinnati. Cincinnati's got one of the worst defenses in the league. Jimmy Garoppolo ate them up last week. He had 22 points, 19 points so far. I think we're in for another at least 20-point outing in this game with 30-point upside if he just goes nuts on the ground and through the air because he's got a nice receiver in John Brown, Cole Beasley, all them. I mean, it's not like great receiving core or just overall team, but Devin Singletary is looking iffy for the game, so I can assume they're going to rely on Josh Allen a little bit here. So I do like Josh Allen in cash games. I am going to plug him in. He just offers us some salary relief compared to the guys like Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes. I'm not saying I don't like those guys, but it's just really hard to fit him in this week and trying to fit in the other guys I want to. So definitely like Josh Allen. At the running back position, there's a ton of options this week. Last week, it was basically lock in Josh Jacobs and then work from there, and Alvin Kamara and work from there. Not so much this week. Josh Jacobs' price did rise. He has a tougher matchup versus Minnesota. But let's go down the list pretty much here. Barkley, obviously he's a great play every single week. He is a beast, arguably the best running back in the league. He's just very expensive, and Tampa Bay's been pretty good versus the run this season. They're decent versus San Francisco week 1, but they shut down Christian McCaffrey last week. That was pitiful. He got 7, 8 points, something like that. Paying that much for Christian McCaffrey. I know it was on a showdown slate because it was Thursday. But yeah, they've been tough versus the run this season. It's a small sample size, but it's nice when the sample size has Christian McCaffrey in it, who's arguably the RB1 this season. So I don't know if I want to play 9,100 for Saquon Barkley. Eli Manning is not the confirmed starter yet. I know the coach did not absolutely lock in that Eli will start this week. Rookie quarterback, it could cause some concern. Not going to play Barkley at 9,100 this week, but I mean, if you want to, I think it's a safe floor. He's got a high ceiling. I need to spend down, and I want some other receivers in. And when I was building my lineups, I cannot fit in one of these absolute high-end backs. I'd love to, though, but just the way that my roster construction worked out. All right, so it's really early in the week, so I mean, definitely things can change. But as of right now, I'm not looking at it. Zeke Elliott versus Miami, though, he should eat in this game. It's just a matter if you can afford him. I could not in this lineup we're building right now. But I love Zeke. He's going to get a heavy workload. Tony Pollard's getting phased out the more we get into the season. And I think this is the week Zeke breaks out versus Miami at home. They are, over 20-point favorites right now. Absolutely insane. Miami is awful, so should be fine. Christian McCaffrey versus Arizona Cardinals, who have one of the worst rush defenses in the league. He should be fine. I will say that Panthers offense did not look too hot last week, especially Cam Newton. I know he threw for a bunch of yards, but he has zero accuracy. Christian McCaffrey was not heavily involved in the game. Tampa Bay pretty much shut him down, but I think he's going to have a bounce-back week. He should be just fine versus Arizona. He's an elite pass catcher and a great runner on the ground. They just got to get him more involved, and I think they do that this week versus Arizona. Alvin Kamara, he was chalk last week, about 82%. He was my number one running back on the week outside of Josh Jacobs. And yeah, he busted. But I'm going to give them a pass because the Saints offense was kind of, they lost Drew Brees, and that's a big loss. And you're not game planning on losing Drew Brees. They had to throw Teddy Bridgewater in, Teddy Two Gloves, and it just put a wrench in everything. I think after a week of game planning, the Saints should be fine. I mean, obviously they get a downgrade with Teddy Bridgewater in because Drew Brees is an established vet, one of the best quarterbacks of all time. He knows how to run that offense. But a week of practice with Teddy Bridgewater in, they should be able to get Kamara back involved and be a more effective offense. But I'm not really looking into using Kamara this week just because of no Drew Brees. Dalvin Cook, though, this is the guy I really like this week versus Oakland. They do not have the best defense in the world. I think we know that. They looked pretty solid in the first quarter versus the Chiefs, and that just went completely away. Patrick Mahomes went nuts. Dalvin Cook is awesome. I can see his price getting near McCaffrey levels at the end of this season, maybe even next week. The guy has been good. If you look at his first 2 games of the season, he had 111 yards on the ground versus Atlanta, 9 yards through the air. But last week he was more involved in the passing game, had 3 targets, 3 catches, 37 yards, had 154 yards on the ground, 20 attempts, had a super long 75-yard touchdown. The guy is good. They love to run the ball. He's averaging 30 points per game the first 2 weeks, and I don't think Oakland's going to be able to stop them at home, and they're going to run the ball. They should be able to get a lead here. I love Dalvin Cook in this matchup. I'm going to plug him in, and I like the discounts we get with him off of Kamara, McCaffrey, Elliott, and Barkley. And he has just as high as the ceiling, and he's got a very safe floor as well with his involvement in the passing game. So I love Dalvin Cook this week. Austin Eckler, I like a ton, and he's in the lineup we're going to be talking about. So let's talk about Austin Eckler. The guy is good. Well, I actually skipped a couple. No, I didn't skip anyone. But Austin Eckler, he is good. He is making Melvin Gordon look like an afterthought in this offense. Eckler's been great. He's been very efficient. He's heavily involved in the passing game. If you just look through his work through the air this season, he's had 15 targets, 12 catches, over nearly 200 yards through the air so far, about 150. Kind of rounded that a little bit. 2 touchdowns through the air this season, 17 attempts on the ground. Was not too efficient on the ground last week, but still 66 yards, a touchdown. He's the main running back. He is very good, too. It's not like he's just some filler running back. He is very, very good. And, yeah, I know Melvin Gordon's probably a risk he didn't hold out because Eckler's making him look extremely replaceable. But, yeah, like Austin Eckler in this matchup, Houston was pretty good versus the run last year, but they also lost Jadeveon Clowney, so he should be fine. Definitely like the volume he's going to get at 7,200. And, again, I can see his price only going up from here. He's been very good, and they're playing at home, so I do like that. Le'Veon Bell, not too interested versus New England. I think they fall behind, and obviously he's involved in the passing game, but, it's just not my favorite play in the world. Melvin Gordon, sorry, there's bugs out here. It's too nice of a day to be inside, so thought I'd do the video outside. Melvin Gordon's obviously not playing. David Johnson, not too interested versus Carolina. James Conner is banged up right now, so not too interested in him. Aaron Jones, he's coming off a really good game versus Minnesota, where he ended up getting 28 points, 23 yards, 116 yards, 1 touchdown, had 4 receptions for 34 yards. That's what happens when you use him. Get Jamal Williams off the field. This guy is very good. Just not too interested in him this week versus Denver. I know they don't have the best run defense in the world, but still, there's other places I like. Sonny Michel, the Patriots should get a big lead on the Jets, and they should be able to just pound it with Michel. He had a pretty good week last week. A big bounce back off his 15-carry, 14-yard performance versus the Steelers. Ended up having 21 carries for 85 yards and a touchdown last week versus the Miami Dolphins. They got a lead, and they could ground it out with him. So, I do like that. Let's see. Sorry if you guys can hear that dog barking. I think that's my dog, actually. I'm not totally sure, though. But anyway, yeah, we have Chris Carson versus the Saints. He's having a little bit of a fumble problem. Didn't have the best week last week. 15 attempts for 60 yards, 3 catches for 27 yards. Still got you double-digit points at 10, but just not too interested in him this week versus the Saints. They have a pretty stiff run D, so I think I'm going to pass on Chris Carson. I'd much rather play Marlon Mack. I like him in the flex spot this week going up against Atlanta. We know they suck versus the run. They give up a ton through the air versus receiving backs as well. Marlon Mack should see a heavy workload in this game. Week 1, he went absolutely nuts. 25 carries for 174 yards and a touchdown. Week 2 was not very efficient on the ground. 20 attempts for 51 yards, 2 receptions, 3 targets, 12 yards. But he's still got a ton of work, 20 carries, and if he can get 20 plus touches versus the Atlanta Falcons, he should have a extremely good game versus them. They're at home as well, and if they can stay in this game, it should be a big Marlon Mack day. I can expect him to get a touchdown, hopefully get a second one, and you'd be looking very good at 5,800. He just seems like a really good value on this slate at 5,800. At the wide receiver position, there's a ton of good plays here. DeAndre Hopkins versus the Chargers. It's DeAndre Hopkins. He did struggle last week versus Jalen Ramsey, which is kind of to be expected. He still got you 9 points, but that's not what you're looking for at 8,100. So I'm going to pass on DeAndre Hopkins this week versus the Chargers, even though it's DeAndre Hopkins and he can go nuts any single slate. Devontae Adams, he kind of bounced back. Did not have a huge day. Still at 106 yards. 7 receptions, didn't get in the end zone, but still had 20 points, in which I shouldn't say he didn't have a huge day. 20 points is pretty good for not scoring a touchdown, but we'd hope for him to get 20 points when he's priced this high. But still he's going to be Aaron Rodgers' #1 target versus Denver. Amari Cooper going up against the Dolphins. I like Dak Prescott, which means I have to like Amari Cooper as #1 target. Michael Gallup is gone, so you're going to have to expect an even heavier workload from Amari Cooper. Cooper's had a great start to this season. Usually he's a boom-bust guy, but so far he's just been pretty solid. Week 1 he had 25.6 points, 6 receptions on 9 targets, 106 yards and a touchdown. Last week, didn't have a huge game. Had 4 receptions on 5 targets, but still got in the end zone, which gave him 14.4 points. Like I said, no Michael Gallup. He should have a pretty good game this week. Michael Thomas, no Drew Brees, so I'm going to have to pass on that. Julio Jones is a monster. He's matchup proof. I don't care who he's going against. Matt Ryan's playing in a dome, which is good for Julio Jones because he's dependent on Matt Ryan. Not saying Julio Jones is a dependent wide receiver. It's just, he can only do as good as Matt Ryan does. And then Antonio Brown, if he's playing, he's obviously in play. Tom Brady looked his way often. He actually missed him wide open in the end zone on a fade route. Or he could have even had a bigger day. He still had 16 points, 8 targets, 4 receptions. They really did not have to pass much this game because they just won 43-0. If this would in any way be a close game, Antonio Brown should have a huge day. But unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen versus the New York Jets. So I think he's only a GPP flyer only. I shouldn't say flyer because he's 7,100, but I think he's a GPP play. Tyreek Hill is out. Keenan Allen, he's one of my favorite wide receivers on the entire slate going up against the against Houston. They do not have the best defense in the world, and he should eat. He has a 91 weighted opportunity share so far this season. Absolutely insane. He's dominating the market share on that team, and there's really no one to compete with targets outside of Mike Williams. Hunter Henry is gone. It's really just him and Eckler Mike Williams is the big play guy. Other than that, it's pretty much the Keenan Allen show. He's going to be heavily involved in this game. He's got 25 targets through 2 weeks this season, 8 receptions in both games, near 100 yards both games. Did score a touchdown week 1. 30 points week 1, 17 points last week. He should have no problem versus this Houston defense. He's the #1 wide receiver on this team. Phillip Rivers will look his way early and often. I think he's one of the safest plays this week. I don't understand his pricing at $7K. I would love to fit him in this lineup, and if you want to work around it, you could end up just changing a few things to get Keenan Allen in. But unfortunately, he did not make this lineup build. But I love him this week. He's arguably my wide receiver 1 on the slate. I have not ran my projections yet because I still got the Monday night game, but I have to think Keenan Allen is going to be near the tops of this list, maybe top 5, but I would not be surprised maybe he ended up being #1 wide receiver on this list. So definitely love Keenan Allen. Chris Godwin is actually priced more than Mike Evans this week, which I did not see that coming, but it did actually happen, and it's deserved. Godwin's been pretty good this season. He's had 14 points week 1, 29 points last week, 9 targets, 8 receptions, 121 yards, and a touchdown. The guy's good. He's playing the Larry Fitzgerald role in the Bruce Arians offense. O.J. Howard's an afterthought. And really, Chris Godwin's in a prime position here versus the New York Giants. They do not have a good defense. They don't have a good team. So I think Chris Godwin, this is another game that he can eat. It does not feel great paying $6,900 for Chris Godwin. And, I really like the savings we get with Mike Evans. But, you got to respect the guy. He is going to have a big season as long as he stays healthy. AJ Green's out. Sammy Watkins had a pretty disappointing performance last week compared to his week 1 performance. I had him in a lot of my lineups. He was actually in my cash lineup. It was still a good weekend for cash, but he's a little disappointed. I know I wasn't expecting another 3 touchdown game, but just couldn't connect with Tyreek Hill. Not Tyreek Hill, Patrick Mahomes. Now, I wasn't disappointed in his targets. He had 13 targets, which was actually more than week 1. Only came down with 6 receptions for 49 yards, did not find the end zone. Still 10 points, but 7,200, that's not what we're looking for. He gets a tougher matchup versus Baltimore this week. Adam Thielen should be fine versus Oakland, but I prefer Dalvin Cook, and they just don't pass the ball a ton. He still had 8 targets for 75 yards, didn't get into the end zone, but he's one of the safer plays at wide receiver every single week. Kenny Golladay, I guess he's fine. Mike Evans, he's very cheap at 6,600. He's cheaper than Chris Godwin, which I think is interesting. He's been getting a lot of air yards, average depth of targets higher. If they can connect him and Jameis Winston, he should have a big day versus the Giants. This could be his breakout game, and he is cheaper than Godwin, so I do like the value there. Tyler Boyd's just a safe, he's not a huge play guy, but he's going to get a lot of targets. He's a safe play. Broke 100 yards last week, had a touchdown called back, caught all 10 of his targets. And like I said, he's a safe guy. 25 points, 14 points. It's not like he's a low floor guy. It's not like he doesn't have a high ceiling. He's got a high floor, and he's got a decent ceiling. 25 points last week, and he's a wide receiver 1 with him and John Ross until AJ Green's back. So don't mind Tyler Boyd. He's just pretty expensive versus Buffalo. T.Y. Hilton, he's been pretty good the first 2 weeks with Jacoby Brissett. He's facing Atlanta, who we know who does not have a good pass defense. He scored 28 points and 14 points. Don't hate it, don't love it though. It's 6,400. Julian Edelman, obviously in play, but he takes a hit with Antonio Brown. Tyler Lockett's, he's fine if you want to do a Seattle stack for some reason. Stephon Diggs, I prefer Adam Thielen. Although Hollywood Brown, though, this is an interesting play. He didn't do what he did last week, 33 points, but he still was fine, 16 points. He saw more targets, 13 targets. I know there's a concern because he barely played the game. Well, guess what? He got 13 targets this week, 8 receptions, 86 yards, did not find the end zone, but still he's one of Lamar Jackson's top targets, and I love this game, so I definitely want to get exposure to Marquise Brown in cash or tournaments, really. I think he's a fine play either. If he gets that kind of volume in this kind of game, he's going to score some serious points. Where are we? DJ Moore, not too interested. Deshaun Jackson's hurt. Michael Gallup's not going to play. Alshon Jeffrey's banged up. Tyrell Williams, Price Rose, not too interested versus Minnesota. John Brown versus the Cincinnati Bengals. I think that's interesting because I like Josh Allen. I have to like John Brown. He's had the first 2 good weeks. He scored 28 points week 1, 14 points week 2, seeing a heavy target share. So if you're going to use Josh Allen, I have no problem if you want to pair him up with John Brown. I think that would make a lot of sense. Josh Gordon versus the Jets. He took a big dip last week with Antonio Brown back. If Antonio Brown happens to not play, that would be a big boost to Josh Gordon. Calvin Ridley caught that long touchdown from Matt Ryan Sunday night, but not too interested versus the Colts. Demarcus Robinson, he went absolutely nuts. I believe he was in the Millie Maker, the winning lineup, which I would hope he would be. He was only 1% owned, 38 Draftkings points, 6 targets, 6 catches, 172 yards, 2 touchdowns. Someone in my comments section last week was asking me about Demarcus Robinson. I said I preferred Mecole Hardman. Hardman had a good game, but Robinson went absolutely nuts. So that was a good call by you. I forget your name off the top of my head, but I remember who you are. So that was a good call on that. Demarcus Robinson went absolutely nuts. I do not see him replicating that, but he should have a good game. And with Tyreek Hill being out, him and Hardman, John Ross continues to ball out. I will say a lot of that was in the last minute of the game where he had the 69-yard touchdown. So, I actually ended up playing John Ross in cash, so that was very, very helpful that happened. But yeah, he's balled out the first 2 games. 158 yards week 1 on 12 targets, 37 DraftKings points. Last week versus the 49ers, 8 targets, 4 catches, 112 yards. It was a 66-yard touchdown, my bad. But yeah, 24 DraftKings points. And versus Buffalo, it's a tougher matchup, but still he's 5,100, worth a shot. He's heavily involved in this offense. He is fast. It's hard to keep up with the guy, so he can always break loose for a long touchdown. That's kind of what he does. Larry Fitzgerald, I like him a lot this week. Him and Christian Kirk, I think they're excellent plays. Godwin ate up the Carolina defense. Mike Evans should have had a bigger game. Jameis Winston just not a very good quarterback. So I like Fitzgerald, and he's been pretty good this season, resurgent with Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, and he's actually getting targeted down the field. It been forever since he's getting 40-yard receptions. This season, he's got a ton already. 13 targets week 1, 11 targets week 2, 5 receptions, 8 receptions, 28 points week 1, 18 points week 2. I like Larry Fitzgerald a lot this week. Him and Christian Kirk are both excellent plays. They should be heavily targeted. This Arizona offense runs a ton of plays, high pace. Definitely like Larry Fitzgerald this week and Christian Kirk. They're both pretty much the same price. Kirk's the young guy. Fitzgerald's, I don't know, I think they're pretty much the same play this week. Mecole Hardman, I don't know about you guys, but I had a ton of Hardman in Mahomes stacks, and Hardman was only 5% owned. I did not play him in cash, but a lot of him in GPPs. I think I was about 30% exposure to them. That 72-yard touchdown got called back. I was so upset. That sucked so bad. I'm sure you guys had some Hardman in Mahomes stack. Talked about them a lot last week. So, yeah, that was very unfortunate, but he looked pretty good. I know the first week he was not targeted whatsoever. He had one target, no catches. But I said, I'm sure they're going to get him involved after a week of actually planning Hardman because, they lost Tyreek Hill mid-game. He had 6 targets, 4 catches, 61 yards, 1 touchdown. Should have been a lot more. So I think Hardman's a fine play versus Baltimore. He is fast. He's pretty much a light version of Tyreek Hill. What else do we got here? Goodwin had a decent game last week. Shepard, not too interested. Fuller versus the Chargers, not really. Mike Williams. A lot of these guys I'm not too interested, but I have a lot of interest in Emmanuel Sanders this weekend. I don't understand why he's only 4,800. I know the Green Bay defense has looked good, but he's looked good as well to start the season, coming off the Achilles injury. He scored 20 points week 1, 28 points week 2, 13 targets as well, 11 receptions, 7 targets week 1. I think Emmanuel Sanders is a cash game lock this week. He's just way too cheap for the amount of volume he's going to see, and he's a very good receiver too. Joe Flacco's number 1. I think Emmanuel Sanders is in for a big game at only 4,800. And he doesn't even have to have a big game at 4,800 if he can just, give a solid performance. We're going to be fine in cash games. And let's see, anyone else that I'm too interested in? Curtis Samuel had a pretty big day. Saw how many targets was that? 13 targets for 91 yards. I don't really trust Cam at the moment. Jamison Crowder had a huge week 1, but that was with Sam Darnold. But he is playing the Adam Gase role in that offense, so I do think that's somewhat interesting. Robbie Anderson, no Sam Darnold. Not going to be interested in that. Let's see, what else we got? DK Metcalf, I'm not too interested in. He is 4,700. He has had a good first 2 weeks. 12 points week 1, 15 points week 2. Russell Wilson is looking his way. He's had 6 targets week 1, 7 targets week 2. I think he's somewhat interesting. Only if you're stacking up the Seahawks and thinking this game could go back and forth. The New Orleans pass D has not been the best. So I understand the play. He's got a lot of talent. It's just, I'm not too interested in the play though, but I'll hate it. Randall Cobb should see an increase in work. He had 6 receptions week 2, 5 receptions week 1. Michael Gallup is not going to be playing. He's the wide receiver 2, going up against the Miami Dolphins, who bleed points to running backs, receivers, and quarterbacks and tight ends. So pretty much everyone is in play if you have a star in your helmet this week. Golden Tate's not playing. Cortland Sutton, he's not the worst play. I do prefer Emmanuel Sanders, and I'm not really looking to play 2 guys on the Denver passing attack, but not the worst play at 4,500. He's fine. Deebo Samuel coming off a pretty good game. He's somewhat interesting, 4,500. Didn't play a ton of snaps though. Dante Pettis not going to play. Cole Beasley, maybe in Josh Allen stacks. Not too interested though. MVS. I don't really want to talk about these guys. The only guy I really want to talk about way down here is Devin Smith at 3,400. So he's pretty much the wide receiver 3 for the Cowboys now that Michael Gallup is gone. He's a deep play threat. He's got some speed. Obviously didn't play week 1, but week 2 he came in for Michael Gallup. 3 targets, 3 receptions, 74 yards, and a touchdown. I think he is worth a GPP flyer at that price tag. And I can expect him to maybe have some ownership just because of that. So let's fill in these wide receiver positions. So I'm not going to be able to spend up here. I really would like to get Keenan Allen in. Maybe like I said, this is a very early look lineup. I put this together shortly, and then I was going to give all my thoughts on it. So I would love to get Keenan Allen in. Unfortunately, I can't. And if I'm not playing Lamar Jackson, and I think that game's going to go nuts, I want exposure to his pass catchers. And if I can't play Lamar Jackson, I'll try to get the points through his pass catchers. So I like getting Hollywood Brown at 5,900 there. I like that he had 13 targets last week, played a lot more snaps, so I think he's a pretty safe play. Lamar Jackson looks amazing. So does Hollywood Brown. Like that right there. Emmanuel Sanders at 4,800. I just think he's way too cheap this week, especially for his talent and his volume he's going to see. Is it the best matchup in the world? No, but still, 4,800. And then we have Larry Fitzgerald or Christian Kirk. I like Christian Kirk a lot. He had a great game last week, 100 and some yards. Larry Fitzgerald, though, I like him a lot too. I'm going to go with Larry Fitzgerald in this lineup. I have no problems at all with Christian Kirk. I think he's a fantastic play. But just give me Old Man Fitz in this lineup. And then we're going to have to look at the tight end position. And obviously Travis Kelce is the top play every single week. It's just a matter if you can afford him. As you can see, I have 3,700 remaining. I cannot afford him. He's going to be just fine. No Tyreek Hill. The offense depends on him even more. He had a great week last week. Broke over 100 yards. Had a really nice touchdown catch. 26 points. I think he's going to be fine. The Baltimore corners are pretty tough. So if you're going to attack them, you're going to want the tight end position there. Travis Kelce should have a pretty good day. Zach Ertz, I don't hate it. Don't love it. George Kittle didn't have the best week last week. Don't love this play. Evan Ingram versus Tampa. Someone's got to catch the ball on that team. He had a great week 1, a little bit of a disappointing week 2. Still had 8 targets for 6 catches. Eli Manning looks awful. If Daniel Jones is starting, I don't know how often he's going to target Evan Ingram, but you'd have to think he's going to look his way. There's just no one really else to catch passes. And Evan Ingram is a very athletic tight end. I don't mind him at all. 5,200 versus Tampa. But the main guy I like here is Mark Andrews at 4,600. I want exposure to this game. If I'm not playing Lamar Jackson in this lineup, I think he's going to do very well. So I want the guys that are going to get points from him. So Mark Andrews, he's had an amazing start to the season. I know a lot of people were hyping him up coming into the year. I liked him a lot too. And he's been amazing. 27 points week 1, 28 points week 2. Hasn't saw less than 8 targets, had 8 catches in both games, broke 100 yards in both games, and caught a touchdown. Him and Lamar Jackson are going to have a great season together. I love Mark Andrews in this matchup versus the Chiefs. They struggled versus the tight end position last season. Looking like they're going to again. Darren Waller had a pretty good game versus them week 2, so I don't mind Mark Andrews at all. And like I said, I do not have Lamar Jackson in this lineup, and that scares me, so I want exposure to his weapons. So I'm going to plug in Mark Andrews. Anyone else at tight end I'm too interested in? Not really. Vance McDonald had a pretty decent week last week. Darren Waller, he's still pretty cheap. He was 3,300 last week, which was insanely too cheap. But now he's going up against Minnesota, who does struggle with the tight end position. They gave up some points to Austin Hooper week 1. Waller's going to be on the field pretty much the entire game. Still had a pretty good week last week. 7 targets, still 6 receptions, 63 yards. Still hasn't found the end zone, but when he does, he's going to crush value at only 4,100. And that's really just about it that I'm interested in. Everyone else is just kind of meh. O.J. Howard, he's got a ton of talent, but you can't trust him in this offense. Bruce Arians does not use the tight end. He never really has, and he still isn't. I kind of called him out last week, but still, 0 targets on 0 receptions. He actually did have a target, but ended up getting called back for offensive pass interference. Week 1, he had 6 points, but you just can't trust him at this point. There's no reason to waste your money on O.J. Howard this week. O.J. Howard, Jared Cook, not too interested, neither with Jason Witten. I know he's going up against Miami. He's just not a high upside play. I mean, he's got a decent floor. He scored a touchdown the first 2 weeks. I guess I shouldn't say I'm not completely disinterested. Maybe there's a little bit of interest there. He's got a safe floor going up against Miami. And pretty much, like I said earlier, everyone with a star on their helmet this week is in play, so I shouldn't just completely write him off. But he is very touchdown dependent here. The week 1, he had 15 yards. Week 2, 25 yards. So he's going to have to score a touchdown for you to hit value. Greg Olsen had a really good week last week. I guess he's somewhat interesting. Versus Tampa, he scored 20 points, 9 targets, 6 catches, 110 yards. So don't hate the play. I just really prefer Mark Andrews this week. Austin Hooper versus the Colts, who just were awful versus the tight end position last season. And week 1, Hooper had a pretty good game. 9 targets, 77 yards. Week 2, 6 targets, 4 catches, 34 yards. If he gets into the end zone, you're going to be pretty happy. And I think he's got a decent shot versus the Colts. That's really just about it now. I know I've said that like 3 times, but I think that's going to be as low as I want to go. Maybe TJ Hawkinson, 3,500. He had a really disappointing week 2 coming off that huge week 1 performance. But I think that's going to be it for that. For the defense, that's going to leave us with 2,900 remaining, and I do not love any of these defenses. Although I will say the Buccaneers defense has been surprisingly okay this season. If you look at their game log, they've scored 9 and 12 points. That's not too bad. And I will say one was versus San Francisco, but San Francisco put up some points week 2. And they put up points week 1 too, but they ended up scoring a defensive touchdown, kind of saved their day. But Carolina, they got after Cam Newton, only allowed 12 points. So I don't think they're the worst play versus the New York Giants. If Eli Manning's playing, that's an even boost to them. Still, if they put Daniel Jones in, it's a rookie quarterback making his first NFL start, so that is pretty intimidating for Daniel Jones, I should say. And they're in Tampa, so I do like that they're the home team. So I don't mind taking a shot at Tampa Bay at only 2,900 versus the New York Giants team. That's hopefully with Eli Manning under center, and we know he loves to turn the ball over. Shouldn't have a huge game. They don't have any pass catchers. It's pretty much just got to contain Saquon Barkley. Maybe they give some points to Evan Ingram, but other than that, I think they're a pretty decently safe play at only 2,900 this week. Any other defenses I'm interested in this week? Obviously, Dallas defense, if you can afford them at 4,300. Just play all your defenses all season versus the Miami Dolphins. They just absolutely suck. The Patriots defense had 2 touchdowns last week, scored 37 points, just absolutely broke the slate. You didn't have to have them in cash games to cash, but you needed them to, win the GPPs. Patriots defense versus the Jets without Sam Darnold. I think they're in play again. They've got a pretty good defense this season. Eagles versus the Lions, don't love it. Bills versus Cincy. Cincy hasn't looked terrible. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. Packers defense has been improved. Not really interested in any of these defenses, though. It's pretty much for me this week. It's going to be the Cowboys, Patriots, the Buccaneers at 2,900. I like that value there. Chargers at home versus Houston. I don't love using defenses versus Deshaun Watson, but I guess it's not the worst play in the world at only 2,500. The Steelers at 2,300 versus the 49ers. If they were at home, I'd be a little bit more interested, but on the road, they lost Big Ben, so it's a big blow to the team as well. Not going to play the Saints against Seattle. Not playing the Jets versus New England. Dolphins, no, not happening. Never going to play the Bengals defense, Ravens, and Chiefs. I know the Ravens are usually the most expensive defense on the slate, but they're facing Patrick Mahomes, who is matchup proof, so will not be touching the Ravens, will not be touching the Chiefs in this game. Broncos not going to play defense versus Aaron Rodgers, and don't really trust the Panthers defense. Kyler Murray, I'd rather play Kyler Murray, to be honest. Cardinals defense, not very good. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Not too interested in anybody else. I know this is probably a really long video, but it's just the early look, so it really helps just to talk through everything, and then it helps throughout the week doing research. So I think it's going to be it. Final lineup, just very initial lineup. Not a ton of thought into this because I'm just kind of my initial first looks. Josh Allen at Q, I just like the price there. Dalvin Cook at 7,800. I think his price is only going to go up, and they're at home versus Oakland, like that a lot. Austin Eckler is a monster. Catches a ton of passes. We like that on DraftKings scoring. 7,200 still seems a little bit too cheap for him. We saw Alvin Kamara have a pretty good game through the air versus Houston. Hollywood Brown, 5,900. I don't have Lamar Jackson in this lineup, and I'm scared of that, so I want his weapons. Emmanuel Sanders is too cheap. Larry Fitzgerald, either him or Christian Kirk in this lineup. You can switch that. I like both of them. Mark Andrews, just more exposure to not having Lamar Jackson, if that makes sense. Marlon Mack seems a little too cheap versus the Atlanta Falcons for his workload he's going to get. And then the Buccaneers defense at home versus hopefully Eli Manning. So anyway, guys, that's all I got for the video. Remember to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out. I really appreciate it. If you are interested in any of my extra content, like my spreadsheets I build every week, links in the description below for my Patreon. Wish you guys the best of luck on the showdown slate tonight. And I should say go Browns because it's my home team. So leave you guys with that and see you in the next video.